Alright, so Park Chan-wook. For my complete thoughts on Park Chan-wook as a filmmaker so far, just click here. Otherwise, let's just get right to the rankings. Now, just as a quick aside, I am including The Little Drummer Girl, which is a television series, because he directed all 6 episodes. I am not including The Sympathizer, which, he directed 3 of the episodes, but he only produced the rest of it. So it feels more like a producing job. So I've seen it, I really like it. It would actually be relatively high up in the rankings if I included it, but it's not a directed work completely, so I'm leaving it off. Otherwise, let's just get to it. Number 13 is The Moon is the Sun's Dream. Now this is Park's very first film, and it's awful. It is outright bad. It is not a good movie. He decided he wanted to make a movie. He was a film critic. He had studied, I think he had studied painting in college. He never studied film, but he just loved movies and he wanted to make a movie. So he pulled together some funds, he pulled together some friends, and they managed to make something sort of like a movie. It's nominally about a kind of a love triangle between a photographer, his half-brother gangster, and then his half-brother gangster's wife. And it jumps timelines. The actual central relationships are deeply uninvolving and deeply unconvincing. All it is these little details that are meant to invoke great meaning, like the time of day that he proposed to her is 4/11, and it's engraved on a watch in a ring, and it doesn't actually create any meaning. It just becomes an affectation, and that's kind of the entire film. It's really just affectation. Affectation from someone who loves movies. Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times gets shown a lot in the movie, but who has no idea how to actually pull it together. When Park Chan-wook says that he wishes his first 2 movies didn't exist, I completely understand it in this case. This movie's bad, it's not really worth discovery, and I kind of wish he had been able to completely suppress it. As it stands, it's freely available on YouTube. Don't know why, but it is. Number 12 is Trio. Now, this is his second film, and Park actually says that he's more ashamed of this one than his first. I don't think he should be. I think this is a little better. I don't think it's quite terrible. But the big behind the scenes information is that production companies actually changed hands halfway through. And assuming the film was actually filmed in roughly chronological order, it's easy to see where it actually happened. So it's the story of a gangster and his friend who is suicidal, and then they kind of pick up a girl during a heist that they go on, and then they talk about doing a big score together, but the woman is trying to get back her child who was taken away from her, and it's very loosely told, but within the first half, it doesn't really have like a dramatic core, but a dark comedy core, and I actually kind of get into it. I think it's fairly amusing for like the first half. And then about halfway through, as they're talking about a big score that they're going to do, they have their car stolen, and it's completely ironic because they steal a car the same way from someone else earlier. And then the movie just kind of steadily progresses into melodrama. Now, Park always has a certain melodramatic aspect to his filmmaking, where he is, telling big stories in big ways. I think the kind way, the perhaps more accurate way to describe it is Baroque romance. But it just goes straight melodrama by the end, and the first half of the film is not built for that. It's a dark comedy that suddenly decides it's going to take all of these characters seriously and just go on this serious direction, and I don't think it works. It just completely drags the film down, and it becomes a huge disappointment in the end. That being said, I do like the first half. It is just like dark comedy, and I enjoy it, but that second half is a mess, and it just doesn't work. Number 11 is Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. Now this is his 4th film. This was what he made after he got a blank check after the success of Joint Security Area, and I think it's solidly good. I think it's his least good movie. I think it's the least movie out of everything he made since Joint Security Area, but I do think it's good. My problem is it's so spare, especially in the first half. It feels like a script that he never quite cracked how to actually make the script itself interesting. And then he just imbued so much of his cinematic craft into it that he elevated the script as much as possible simply by making it so well. I just find the first half so bloated. It feels like one of those early scripts that someone has where they kind of have an idea, but they don't really know how to build an entire movie out of it. But Park's craft is just so good that it really does carry the film. So it's the story of a deaf and mute guy whose sister has serious kidney issues and he needs to get her a kidney. He is incompatible with her because they have different blood types. And so he decides that in order to get the money, he's going to kidnap his boss's daughter, hold her for ransom, and then use the money to buy an organ on the black market. And everything goes wrong. You know, there are black comic elements to it, but it's ultimately kind of a tragedy of how two men who are like thrown into this situation deal with it. One is more sympathetic than the other. There is also a kind of a wonderful supporting performance of the deaf mute's girlfriend, who is kind of an anarchist, a communist anarchist, and she just ends up so over her head that it gets kind of funny. She seems to be kind of a butt of a few jokes just by the fact that she gets herself so in over her head. And in the end, the actual ending is actually surprisingly satisfying. The entire Vengeance trilogy is, you know, three different looks at how vengeance operates. And in the point of Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance is that the vengeance cycle never ends. It's like there's always going to be some other layer to it. And I find that ultimately very satisfying. I just wish like the first half had more going on because it's so spare and so little going on. But otherwise, it's like it is a solidly good film, and I do enjoy it quite a bit. Number 10 is I'm a Cyborg, but that's okay. Now, this feels like two things from outside the film. On the one hand, it's just a break from the Vengeance trilogy. He finished the Vengeance trilogy and then he made this, a weird romantic comedy set in a mental hospital. And it's also reportedly like a gift for his daughter. Apparently, it was a very special thing for his daughter that he made this. And I think it's pretty good. It's very busy, it's overstuffed, but there is an emotional core here between the two main characters. There is Cha, the titular cyborg. She's not actually a cyborg, and another patient who steals things. And you know, he'll steal actual things, but mostly his thing is that he steals aspects of people's personalities. And so, you know, he'll find the guy who is way too polite and he'll steal his politeness. And then he ends up walking backwards because that's a polite thing in Korean culture. And you know, it's amusing in that sort of way, and it's full of all of this busyness as, you know, all of these side characters get their moments. It's not, you know, great stuff, but it's entertaining stuff. But at the core of it is this relationship between the two patients, and they actually learn to connect over time, you know, kind of helping each other grow in terms of their mental health on a certain level, but also in terms of actually connecting with other people, connecting with each other. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the male patient actually steals Cha's sympathy at one point. You know, and sympathy is whatever. Anyway, and you know, it turns her into a bit of a monster, but then he gains the sympathy that he's always lost, and they have to actually find like a middle ground, and it's actually quite nice. And you know, there are these entertaining little sequences where she imagines herself becoming a cyborg like this, and you know, she starts shooting people, so it allows Park to go on his stylistic excesses within it. And I feel like all of the busyness is both a positive and a negative for the film, because on a positive, it is all like fun and entertaining, but it does distract from the emotional core of the film, which I think is actually quite solid. So I think it's good overall. It feels a little too messy for its own good, but I do enjoy it. Number 9 is Lady Vengeance, or Sympathy for Lady Vengeance. And this is the final entry in the Vengeance trilogy, and I think it's actually quite good. It echoes a lot of the Greek drama aspects that are very obviously present in Oldboy. I just feel like it doesn't quite have the focus in the final act that Oldboy does. So it's the story of Gumja. She is a woman who took part in kidnapping operations with her former teacher, Mr. Beck. When she was younger, she got caught when one of their kidnapped kids dies, and she spends 13 years in prison. And when she gets out, she's out for vengeance. And she's out for vengeance because she lost a large part of her life because she fell in with Mr. Beck. And she, it's just this effort to craft the perfect vengeance for her, ultimately ending with killing him. And it involves like a custom created double-barreled handgun, which has like terrible aim, but has so much violent power in it that it is like the main source of black comedy within the film. The problem is, it especially in its last act, it's just so stuffed of minor characters who don't seem to matter that much for her story. She brings all of the parents of kids who have died from Mr. Beck to face him, and like none of them had been introduced before the final act. So we have a bunch of like big acting from minor characters we've never met before who kind of dominate the last act of the film. Whereas Oldboy was purely focused on Odesu and how he is, dealing with the elements of his vengeance that he's trying to wrought. Here, it just becomes like all over the place, and it doesn't quite have that right connection. I do think it's good. It's gorgeous to look at, like most of his films, and I do think the actual core of Gumja and her path is fairly solid. It's just I really wish that the final act had been really like focused on her. There is an idea behind it. It's about the kind of how vengeance isn't only belonging to her, about how it belongs to all of the violence that she actually helped wrought, but also all of the violence that Mr. Beck wrought on the world, and how it can't just be hers. But also it ends up being about how she can't have everything because she changed so much in the journey, which I really do appreciate. However, I feel like the last act doesn't quite connect as well as it should, and it kind of holds it back a bit. Number 8 is Stoker. Now, this is Park's American movie. It was filmed in Tennessee, though it's set in North Carolina. Someone does mention the Biltmore Hotel. It is the story of the creation of a monster, and I really like it. It is that sexy formalism that Park is just kind of effortlessly bringing to the screen on full display, and I really, really get into it. So it's the story of India. She is an 18-year-old girl whose father died just before her 18th birthday, and then on her 18th birthday comes Charlie, her uncle that she had never known about. Her mother, Evelyn, is just completely broken up in the whole situation, and she ends up connecting with Charlie very closely, but Charlie's obvious desire is India herself. And so Charlie ends up kind of molding her, or perhaps bringing out the monster within her, because she starts kind of mousy and quiet, but then, she's always wearing these schoolgirl shoes, but by the end she's wearing heels and, killing people. And I really like it. It is kind of pure horror, and I really get into it. It is kind of empty on a certain level, really no more than just kind of like, let's create a monster out of this girl. But I think it's a fun journey. All of the little pieces she has to put together within her psyche are very intricately laid out and played out, and I think it works really well. If I have a problem with the movie, it's her mother, Evelyn, played by Nicole Kidman, who kind of doesn't have anything to do in the movie. She is kind of a vacuum, a cipher. She doesn't like do much of anything. Her only really good moment is late when she has this speech to India where she tells India that she hates her. And it's because she's stealing Charlie's affection away from her. it's a fun speech. And you know, the movie itself, it's like, I don't think it has a whole lot to talk about it, but I do find it to be an entertaining film. I've seen it a few times. I really get into it, and it's just, it's fun. I really like it. Number 7 is the series The Little Drummer Girl. This is the series that Park made for the BBC and was shown on AMC in America. So it's a European-based production, and it's based on the John le Carré novel of the same name, about a young actress named Charlie who gets recruited by Mossad to infiltrate a bomb-making cell of Palestinian terrorists. And I think it's really good. I have long had problems with long-form television because I don't think many people actually understand how to sustain a story over the course of a lot of hours. And, you know, 6 hours here feels like it may be a little long, but ultimately I never feel like the show is just kind of spinning its wheels in order to fill time. Each episode feels intentional and complete as we move through the journey of mystery and deception and infiltration that is all centered on our central character, played by a very good Florence Pugh. It is a really good look at the dehumanizing nature of spycraft, which is kind of the central thesis of all of John le Carré's written works. And at the center of it is just this question of who am I? You know, the last lines of the entire series echo that question. It's like, who am I? Two characters say to each other because they don't actually know anymore. They've so completely lost themselves in the roles of, you know, someone that they're not actually. And, you know, it leaves them just lost in the world of like trying to live things genuinely. They can't do it. And so they have to try to kind of learn together. And that, of course, happens across this entire investigation that grows across Europe, mostly based in Germany and England, as they, you know, as she gets deeper into the organization, more trusted, and, you know, it's full of these marvelously tense scenes that she has to, you know, sell herself as someone that she's not. But then as she's selling herself, is she becoming the person that she's selling herself as? And this gets mirrored by Alexander Skarsgård's character, who is a dedicated Israeli Mossad agent, but he just spends the entire show echoing Palestinian propaganda. And it's like, is he actually who he says he is? Is he actually who he is pretending to be? It's like, who is he? You know, and that whole question is just fascinatingly presented across the entire film, across the entire 6 episodes, and I think it works really well. I mean, it's, you know, it's 6 episodes of television. You will binge watch 8 episodes of Stranger Things without even really thinking about it. So maybe give this a shot. It's kind of hard to find. I could only really find it on Amazon Prime. I just kind of bought it, so it's mine. But, you know, I'm happy I own it, and I've actually watched it a couple of times. It's quite good. Number 6 is No Other Choice. This was the movie he released last year in 2025, and I find it really funny. Now, the trailers are misleading. It's not the first time in the world trailers have been misleading about a movie. The trailers make it feel like it's much more manic than it actually is, but this is very mannered. It's very in control. This is Park very much in his element, closer to something like Decision to Leave, where everything is in tight control. He does have moments of just slapstick humor, which are brought from these awful situations, which are actually laugh out loud funny, and I really enjoy them. But ultimately, it's actually a shockingly sad story of a man completely lost in a world that's changing around him. So nominally, it's a critique of Korean capitalism. It's really kind of a look at an industry that is just rapidly changing and requiring less and less direct physical labor, and, you know, the few people who are just clinging to it without wanting to change from it. So it's as much a critique of just kind of a certain Korean masculine ethos of, this is how I built my life and I can't do anything else. And so the main character, Man-soo, spent 25 years in the paper industry, you know, manufacturing paper, and he knows a lot about it. He's very good at it. He went to night school to get a chemical engineering degree in order to advance his career. He became a manager, and then he's laid off for 13 months without the ability to get work. And so he decides that in a moment of desperation, he's going to kill someone at an existing paper company and take his job, except He's been interviewing for jobs for more than a year, and he keeps not getting the job. So he decides he's going to find the best qualified candidates who would apply for the job, kill them, and then kill the target so that he gets the job. And, it actually takes a while for this plot to develop, because Park is more interested in creating characters in which to sympathize than he is in trying to get us to Blackley comic antics. And I think that's where the movie's strength ultimately lies, and it's kind of a hidden strength by the end, because the movie sells itself more as kind of an outright comedy. So by the end, when, we have this like weirdly dour denouement where, actually everything has been won, but it's such an empty thing. And it has this weird power by the end where it's like, should we be celebrating this at all? I mean, it's kind of a mirror to Stoker, which was the creation of a monster. Here we watch another creation of a monster. And, him celebrating in an empty factory is like, should this be something that we should be joining in on? And it's surprisingly a hard-edged film. I do feel like this is a movie that's going to grow on me over time. There's a lot of like little business, a lot of subplots and stuff that that feel like incongruous to everything that's going around them. In particular, around his two kids, it just feels like extra stuff. It definitely has an element of it needs to be there in order to inform his character, but at the same time, there's so much. I'm like, I don't know how much of this I can take in, and that ends up being a bit of an issue. But I kind of had similar issues with Decision to Leave, and I eventually got over that and felt like they were net contributors to the film instead of net detractors, and I love that movie. So will that happen with No Other Choice? Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. Number 5 is Joint Security Area. This is kind of Park Chan-wook's first movie. He did make The Moon is a Sun's Dream and Trio before this, but he kind of wishes those didn't exist, and he wants everyone to start with Joint Security Area. And it makes sense. This feels like a Park movie, unlike the first two. The first two feel like just like shotgun blasts from an enthusiast who has no idea what they're doing. This feels like a composed film from a practiced filmmaker. It is a shockingly mature film from someone who had been making, The Moon is a Sun Dream and Trio before. It is the story of the demilitarized zone between South Korea and North Korea. It's an investigation about a murder that happened at the North Korean guardhouse just inside the North Korean border. And, dissecting what happened from different points of view. And what happened was 4 people from across the border learned to develop a real friendship. And it all came apart in a tragic way. And it's really ultimately deeply sad about the split in Korea, the split that keeps North Korea and South Korea apart. It's not, kind of empty-headed saying, oh, why can't we all just get along? It's actually very pro-South Korean. There's nothing good viewed in North Korea. One of the North Korean soldiers is ordered to send his dog to the butcher so the troop can eat. Whereas, all of this stuff that they share between the two pairs of men, all the good stuff is from South Korea, in particular cookies and porn. And it's like, it's very pro-South Korean, but it's still ultimately tragic because while these two peoples with shared blood can connect, ultimately there are these larger forces that prevent them. And it's not like an imposing, oh, you're not allowed to. There's this magnificently tight scene where, the South Korean asks the North Korean, well, maybe you can come to South Korea, and it almost blows everything up. It's just no. It's like, I love North Korea, we're going to conquer you, and we're going to unify under North Korea. And, we're going to unify under communism, and it's going to be great. I don't care about your cookies anymore. It's this great scene. But ultimately, it's the story of this relationship that actually, on one level, deepens with the violence that broke out, but then also is completely shattered just by looking into it, because the entire story is an investigation into what's going on from a Korean-Swiss officer who is brought from the outside in order to investigate, and she's actually, the daughter of a North Korean general, which is kept secret. And she kind of ruins everything, which is really sad. Just like looking into it, it's just on a certain level, there's this message of just let boys be boys. But, it's not that simplistic, because ultimately they are so consumed with their own, politics that complete unification between them may never actually be possible. It's actually a really intelligent film. It's incredibly well acted. It's beautiful to look at. This feels like it really should be Park's first movie, and I completely understand him telling the world, ignore the first two. I would recommend that as well. Start here. Number 4 is The Handmaiden. Now, this is the story of a Korean handmaiden who is sent to serve a Japanese lady who is living with her uncle by marriage, who is a Korean Japanophile in the middle of World War II Japanese-occupied Korea. However, the entire story is actually a play on perspective. So Suk-hee is the Korean girl, and she is shown very early to be kind of duplicitous. She's part of a thievery gang and recruited by the fake Japanese count in order to go in and convince the Japanese lady to fall in love with him. So, we know from the beginning that she's not who she says she is. And, the first part out of 3 ends with her being sent into an insane asylum when the Japanese lady, Izuki, turns on her. But then the second part is from Izuki's perspective, and Izuki sees Suk-hee as incredibly naive. And, it's this wonderful twist of perspective as they go. And throughout it all, we learn that both of them are ultimately just pawns in the game between the uncle and the count. And, everyone has their different motives. The uncle is actually like a pornographer historian and just, wants the Izuki to read the pornography to his clients as they bid on reproductions that he's telling them are the real thing, which the count manufactures. And, it's this deep web of, different perspectives and different desires as everyone is actually kind of in conflict with each other. But in the middle of it, we have the love that blooms between Suk-hee and Izuki, who decide that they are going to just kind of take advantage of the entire situation and run off together because, well, it helps that Izuki is the one with the actual money. This twisting of perspectives as we go from part to part is really what kind of gets me. It's so well done. The performances are so precise. Everything is believable within the context of each individual part, so that, we completely believe that, the other is a naive little girl, within each section, and it makes the whole thing compelling. However, I do feel like there's a drawback here. It's a lot of sex. I'm not a prude. I don't mind sex in movies, but ultimately it is a lot. And like the last third of it is just full of sex, and it feels like a distraction. It kind of just keeps going and going and going. It's like we get it. It's time to move on. I do think there is a potential intellectual idea behind it all, where it's this presentation of female on female sex, which is in contrast to the pornography that's being described in the readings, which is much more, male dominating a female type of thing. So it ends up being like some sort of release. I get it. I still just think it's overdone. Park's daughter apparently approves all of his scripts on some level before they go into production, and I think she would have been about 20 years old when this went in production, and it's hard to believe that she didn't do a bit of trolling where she's like, yeah, Dad, put in a lot of sex, and she's just giggling through the whole thing. I don't know. It's my only real drawback. It's a weird drawback to have, but I just feel like it's overbearing by the end. But ultimately, the rest of the film around it is just so good that it drags the film down only just a little bit. The movie is really quite good. Number 3 is Thirst. Now, this is another one of those Park Chan-wook movies that's really grown on me with the years. I really love it. I think this movie is like so close to greatness. And when I first watched it, I thought it was just good. But as I get older, as I revisit it, as I take in all the little details once more, I gain appreciation increasingly with every single viewing. It's the story of a Catholic priest who decides to be selfless and volunteer himself for a most likely to die procedure in order to try to find a vaccine for a terrible disease. He ends up getting a transfusion. The transfusion has vampire blood in it, and he becomes a vampire. No sharp teeth, but the need for blood and the aversion to the sun and garlic is all there. So it's most vampire lore mechanics right there. And, you know, what he does, it's actually an adaptation of an Emile Zola book that doesn't involve vampires at all. The characters in the original book are not a priest. So he transports it all to Korea. He makes the main character a priest, and he includes vampires. And it's ultimately, you know, the original novel is about a man falling in love with a married woman and then them conspiring to kill the husband. And, you know, all of that happens here, but it's given that extra layer of the vampirism and the Catholic Church that provides a shockingly interesting extra layer on top. So it becomes this fight between like the material and the immaterial, between, you know, meaning, greater meaning, and just materialism, between, you know, a true faith in some higher meaning and just sensationalism on the ground. You know, it's like, where is the meaning? And, you know, when he turns the young wife into a vampire and she becomes a complete monster and she becomes addicted to the life of being able to fly around at night and kill people, you know, it's like he ends up kind of getting dragged along reluctantly until he has to fight her back. And it's got a lot of the dark humor that Park is so good at, especially towards the end where, you know, he takes her to the seaside for them to die and she like doesn't want to go, but she has nowhere to go. And it's like, it's so good. And I feel like it's kind of underappreciated because I think it's like sharply intelligent. I think it's really involving, and I think it's just so well made. Again, it looks fantastic. The painting of the apartment completely white is amazing, especially when it gets contrasted with the sharp reds of the blood. You know, and there are a lot of blues as well, and like corrupted greens, and it looks so good. And, you know, again, performances are great, and it looks great, and it's shockingly intelligent, and it just keeps growing on me with every single viewing. And that's the case with most of his films. They just kind of grow on me over time, and this one really has. Number 2 is Oldboy. Now, this is the movie that he's probably going to be known for in America forever, and I think he's made one better. Oldboy is great though. It is Greek tragedy and Baroque romance and Japanese manga and Korean formalism all rolled into one, and it's great. It is this incredibly detailed look at vengeance and how it may be justified, but ultimately it's circular. You know, that's ultimately the point, is like our central character, Odae-soo, ultimately deserved what he needed. And because it's, you know, saying Greek drama can just sound like an empty phrase, but it really is inspired by Greek drama. And it's ultimately because Odae-soo is like a Greek hero and that he's undone by a core flaw. You know, so his core flaw is that he talks too much. It's said constantly over the film. I think like 5 separate characters say it. Odae-soo talks too much. And so the only way to actually resolve that is like how Oedipus resolved his own particular character flaw, which was to gouge out his eyes. And in this case, he has to, Odae-soo has to cut out his own tongue so he stops talking so much. And to get himself to that point where he decides that not only is that justified, but he has to do it himself, he has to come up with it himself, is this very intricately laid out series of extended kind of frantic action beats where he delves into his own past. He's locked into a private prison for 15 years and he has no idea why, he has no idea who did it. And so like 5 years in, he decides to just start making a list of everyone he wronged, and it's an incredibly long list. And the irony is the person he wronged isn't in the list. He completely forgot who he wronged. And his explanation at the end is like, oh, you robbed me of the memory. You stole the memory from me. And it's just simply, no, you forgot. It was so unimportant to you. That slip of the tongue was so unimportant to you during school, but it was so important to me because it ruined my life, and I'm going to ruin yours for it. It's like, it's this beautiful arc, this beautiful circle of vengeance, and it's so ultimately tragic in a very traditional Greek sense that it works so well. On top of that, the entire cast is amazing. You have the characters playing Oh Dae-soo and Mi-do, and they play really well off of each other despite the hidden past between them. And then you have the bad guy who is just that cool and collected and looks like an Adonis. The age difference between him and Oh Dae-soo is so weirdly apparent, but apparently was a very conscious decision in order to kind of differentiate them, where it does feel like as Oh Dae-soo goes up that tower to face him, it is him facing down a god. God, Deus Ex Machina, comes from Greek tragedy. It's that idea of like a god coming in and resolving everything. That's ultimately what it happens. It's like his revelation of what happens just kind of resolves everything, and it's so deeply tragic and wonderful. And on top of that, Park does his most famous thing here, which is that long hallway fight, which is just amazing. It's just so incredibly executed and so completely compelling. And it's just that long, complex shot, and it works so well. There are no tricks to it. Well, apparently there's a tiny bit of CGI to cover up some stuff. But other than that, it's like there are no tricks to it. It's just execution, and it's so compelling. The movie is incredibly entertaining, but it's incredibly hard to take. It's so full of just awful violence and like terrible tragedy, but for those who can take it, it's so worthwhile. This movie's great. Number 1 is Decision to Leave. Now, this is the ultimate film that has grown on me over the last few years. I've seen it 3 or 4 times, and every single time I watch it, I like it more and more and more, until I think it's his best movie. I think it is not only his best movie, I think it's the movie that most encapsulates who he is as a filmmaker. It's this incredibly subtle, quiet look at the nature of violence and romance, and I ultimately get so involved in it, and I find it ultimately so sad in the end. It's so great. It's the story of a detective in Busan who is investigating a death. A man fell off a cliff and he died, and it looks like either a suicide or an accident, and he has to investigate. He investigates the man's wife, who is a Chinese immigrant, who has this wonderful introduction where she introduces herself every single time she meets someone, where she says, I am Chinese and my Korean is insufficient, and yet her Korean is perfect. It's kind of an underlying joke. It's like she has so consumed Korean culture that she can speak better than native Koreans. It's because of how she learned Korean. She watches old movies. That's kind of the thing. Anyway, and so what develops is this romance between them, but it's a romance that can never be consummated because the detective is married, and she's a suspect in a murder. But then when he clears her, it's like one of the barriers is down, but he's still married, and what can happen? But then he discovers that she actually did kill him, that she very much executed her husband by pushing him off the cliff. And everything falls apart, and that's just halfway through. And then they meet again in Ipo, in a smaller Korean city with a nuclear power plant where the detective's wife works. And they're connected again, and the woman's new husband ends up dead, and he has to investigate. And it's this story of incredible romance and love that just gets missed, and no one can connect, and it's so sad. And the way Park actually films it is so subtly driven that it just hides this torrent of emotion, and I find it incredibly compelling. There are constant motifs to the ocean and to waves, and it ultimately pays off in the end in tragic ways. And this is a film that I felt a certain distance to when I first watched it, because in particular in the first half, there's a subplot of an investigation into another murder that feels extra. It doesn't feel like it really connects that much. I mean, there's an obvious thematic connection, especially as the second half plays out, but as I keep watching it, I keep finding it more and more vital. It is a step removed in terms of very literal plot concerns, but ultimately it's very intimately tied thematically in a way that really informs things and kind of gives things deeper meaning and deeper explanation. And I love it. I think it's so great. I hope Park makes even better in the future, but for now, I really think that Decision to Leave is the absolute top of his career. So that's it. That's Park Chan-wook as of now, early 2026. Hopefully this will be out of date very soon. Hopefully he'll get another project off the ground in the next few months, and we'll hear about some adaptation of some book that he fell in love with 20 years ago again. I don't know. We'll find out. But as it stands, that's it. I think he's an incredible cinematic talent. I think he's got very good narrative skills, and I think he's only halfway. I think he's got mountains to climb, and I think he's got the tools and the ability to climb them. I want him to make many, many more movies, and I want to enjoy them, and I think I will. So thank you, Mr. Park, for all that you've done. And thank you, everyone. Please discover Park, even if you need dubbing. Watch them with subtitles. I think you'll find them worthwhile.